Polybius, the video game that controlled players' minds. So it's the early 1980s in a suburban arcade outside of Portland, Oregon, and it's just filled with kids, preteens, teens, all pumping quarter after quarter into Space Invaders, Asteroids, Missile Command, Pac-Man, you know, all the classics. It's the beginning of the arcade craze, and the place is packed. Kids crowded around each video game cabinets with a line of coins propped up on the console to declare who's going to be next. You know, it's like any other scene you've seen in any other arcade, in any other mall, in any other suburb in America. Except for one thing. In the corner, there's this one game. It's the size of any other game cabinet, but unlike every other video game at the time, there's no flashy graphic designs on it. It was just this giant black box. And there was no official title across the game cabinet either, so it officially had no name. But it was called Polybius, and it may have been a government-created video game used to control the minds of the day's youths. Polybius, a name given to the game much later and borrowed from the name of the Greek historian who was one of the first historians to emphasize explaining the cause of events rather than just recounting events, was an arcade game that leaned heavily on mesmerizing geometric patterns and colorful shapes, making the game instantly hypnotic and addicting. So addicting, in fact, that it was said that those who played it couldn't stop playing it and began to act oddly because of it. There were symptoms of stress, extreme nausea, even horrifying nightmares. Even worse, some players claimed to suffer seizures from playing Polybius, enduring short-term amnesia, while some felt unable to control their own thoughts. Yet, despite all these terrible side effects, teens couldn't get enough of the game. There'd be stories of lines forming outside of the arcade just to play Polybius, with fights over who was next not uncommon. But what's even stranger than the popularity of a not-named video game that caused horrible side effects was how it was serviced. It was reported that Polybius was serviced more frequently than all the other games. Rather than come in when the game was broken, they came in every week. And for those of you who are around in the 80s and can attest that broken video games just sat there for months unfixed, you know that that is really, really rare. So it was also reported that people who serviced them were men dressed in black suits, and that shockingly, they never worried about how the quarters were being collected, or how many quarters for that matter, which, when you think about it, is truly the most important part of creating a video game. That's because they didn't give a damn about how many quarters were pumped into the game. See, when the men in black went to service the games, they were only interested in data mining. They only wanted to know how the game was affecting its players, because those intense, psychoactive, and addictive effects in the player were exactly what the creators of Polybius wanted. Why? Because it was believed that Polybius was actually a game created in a limited release only in the Portland area by some kind of military tech offshoot group who used proprietary behavior modification algorithms developed for the CIA. Apparently, Polybius's disorienting and confusing geometric shapes bend and fold from a center portal like a kind of digital acid trip, which made the mind susceptible to subliminal messages from the US government. Now, shockingly, this is not unheard of. Just a few decades before Polybius, the government really was secretly testing unwitting subjects. MKUltra, an unethical government-led experimental program of the 1950s involving LSD, was uncovered in 1975. Many of MKUltra's subjects did not know they were part of the tests, which were all designed to explore brainwashing and confession techniques. Information on the project was declassified in 2001, showing over 185 researchers and 80 institutions participating in experiment with mind control, resulting in terrible effects on the research subjects. So could Polybius have been the exact same kind of experiment, only in, video game form? There are even stranger stories about Polybius than that. 2 teenagers supposedly disappeared after playing the game, and just a few years ago, a man named Bobby Feldstein claims he was abducted one afternoon when he was 14 after playing the game. Feldstein claims that he was led through a series of underground tunnels and was found the next day more than 60 miles from his house in the middle of Tillamook State Forest. Feinstein claims there was another boy with him, one who rescued him. And the stories keep getting even weirder. In 2006, a man named Stephen Roach claimed he had been one of its original programmers and that his company developed a game with very intense and cutting-edge graphics. But he states that his company was hired to create the Polybius by an unknown South American company, and that Roach's company had no idea what they were really making the game for or why. Unfortunately, Roach offered no proof for his claims. Of course, all this would be better explained if the game was still around in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, it's not. Approximately 1 month after its release, Polybius is said to have disappeared without a trace, the game being taken away from that Portland suburban arcade by, of course, men in black suits.